My cousin and I once spent most of an afternoon throwing rocks at mistletoe and succeeded in gathering a few twigs hung with white berries. It was a tradition on Green River for teenage boys to hoard firecrackers to be lit to celebrate Christmas Eve and Christmas. I never learned how the local practice got started. In other places, New Year and the 4th of July were observed with fireworks. But on Green River, firecrackers were as much a part of Yuletide festivities as Christmas trees or Santa. Beginning before midnight and continuing into Christmas morning, the valley fairly shook with cherry bombs and TNTs exploded one after another. Boys walked back and forth in the cold dark, throwing firecrackers in the yard, sometimes dropping them in mailboxes. It was a special kind of salute, thrilling, scary, and sometimes dangerous. The starry night rang and cracked and boomed and shivered. At church we sang Joy to the World and the serene, O little town of Bethlehem. The banks, barks, and blasts and booms of the firecrackers were a kind of answer, perhaps an amplification of the chorus of praise. Many years later, I wrote a poem about the practice called Firecrackers at Christmas. The poem ends, perhaps the custom had its origins in the peasant pagan times of honoring the solstice around a burning tree, or in the mystery centuries of saluting the miraculous with loudest brag or syllable. Certainly the pioneer had no more valuable gift to bring than lead and powder to offer in the hush of hills. The long rifles, their best tongues for saying the peace, they claimed to carry to the still unchapeled wilderness, just as cannon had been lit in the old world to announce the birth of kings. They fired into the virgin skies, a ceremony we repeated ignorantly. But what delight I felt listening in the unheated bedroom dark, not believing in Santa Claus or expensive gifts, through the terrible cracks along the creek road and up on Olivet, as though great rivers of ice were breaking on the horizon, and trees were bursting at the heart, and new elements were being born, and whip stings and distant booms and the toy chatter of the littlest powder grace notes. That was our roughest and best caroling. One of the best Christmases I remember is that of 1951. My parents had put all their money into the new house they were building and had little to spare for Christmas presents. I had looked through all the catalogs at bicycles, cowboy hats, baseball suits, but somehow I knew I would get only one present that year from my parents. I carefully picked a toy road scraper from the Western Auto catalog. It cost $1.98 and had a real blade that could be tilted, raised, and lowered to scrape roads and smooth sand or dirt. On Christmas morning, the bright yellow road scraper was under the tree. I would play with it for years, carving out roads in the dirt at the edge of the garden, flattening sand washed by rain. But to my surprise, I got an additional gift also, the best I ever received. A little carpenter tool set with saw, hammer, square, level, and hatchet that really worked. For the next few years, I took scraps of lumber from the piles around the house under construction and sawed and hammered boats and airplanes, cars, little huts, drag lines with windlasses made from thread spools. It was that tool set and the road scraper that started me in the habit of making things, of thinking in terms of structures, textures, joining different materials. I had no sense at the time that my obsession with imagining, shaping, and joining would carry over years later from wood and nails and metal into words, finding and placing the exact word, the best word, where it belonged and where it would stay. that with those little tools I was already discovering a passion for imagining and building things that would stay with me for the rest of my life.